Every great American company has faced that moment, that terrifying crossroads where one bad decision could erase decades of trust, loyalty, and hard-earned reputation. In the automotive world, where your name is stamped on millions of machines rolling down millions of roads, one mistake doesn't just cost money, it costs something far more precious. It costs the faith of families who've driven your cars for generations, workers who've built them with pride, and dealers who've staked their livelihoods on your badge. Sometimes a car comes along that's so wrong, so misguided, so catastrophically flawed that it nearly pulls an entire brand into the abyss. These aren't just bad cars. Bad cars come and go and are quickly forgotten. These are vehicles that threaten to destroy the very companies that built them, that turned loyal customers into bitter enemies, that made the world question whether a legendary name deserved to survive. Today, we're looking at the top 10 cars that almost destroyed their own brands, machines that tested the limits of customer patience, dealer networks, and corporate survival itself. Number 10. Cadillac's Cimarron, when luxury forgot its meaning. In 1982, Cadillac made a decision that would haunt them for decades. They took a Chevrolet Cavalier, a basic economy compact car that cost about $7,000, slapped some leather inside, added a Cadillac badge, and tried to sell it for $12,000. The Cimarron was supposed to compete with BMW and Mercedes in the compact luxury market to attract younger buyers who wanted Cadillac quality in a smaller package. Instead, it became the punchline of a cruel joke, the car that taught America what badge engineering meant and why it was a betrayal. Walk into any Cadillac dealership in 1982 and you'd see this tiny, underpowered embarrassment sitting next to elegant Eldorados and stately DeVilles, and the cognitive dissonance was almost painful. Buyers weren't stupid. They could see the same car at the Chevy dealer for $5,000 less, and they felt insulted that Cadillac thought they wouldn't notice. The Cimarron sold poorly, reviewed terribly, and worst of all, it made people question whether Cadillac still understood what luxury meant. It took Cadillac decades to recover their reputation, to convince buyers they were serious about quality again. The Cimarron didn't just fail, it nearly killed the credibility that 3 generations of American success had built. Number 8. Ford Pinto, the car that caught fire and burned trust. The Ford Pinto rolled out in 1971 as America's answer to the fuel crisis and foreign competition. A small, affordable car for regular folks who just needed reliable transportation. For a few years, it sold well, became common in driveways and parking lots across America, and seemed like a success story. Then, the reports started coming in. The lawsuits started piling up, and America learned a terrible truth. The Pinto had a design flaw that could cause the fuel tank to rupture and catch fire in rear-end collisions. Ford knew about the problem before the car even launched, but decided that paying off lawsuits would be cheaper than fixing every vehicle. When that information became public, when Americans learned that Ford had done a cost-benefit analysis that put a dollar value on human lives, something broke that couldn't be easily repaired. This wasn't just about a bad car anymore. It was about corporate morality, about whether companies cared more about their customers or their quarterly earnings. The Pinto became a symbol of everything wrong with American industry, taught in business schools as a cautionary tale about ethics and accountability. Ford survived, but barely, and they spent years rebuilding trust with families who suddenly wondered if their lives mattered to the people in Detroit. The Pinto didn't just damage Ford's reputation, it damaged America's faith in its own industrial giants. Number 8. Chevrolet Vega. Rust, rattles, and broken promises. When Chevrolet introduced the Vega in 1970, they promised American buyers something special. A small car that was actually made well, that could compete with those reliable Japanese imports flooding our shores. The Vega was supposed to be GM's engineering showcase, proof that Detroit could build quality into every car, not just the expensive ones. Motor Trend even named it Car of the Year in 1971, and for a brief moment, it looked like Chevrolet had figured out the small car formula. Then reality set in, and it set in hard. The Vega's aluminum engine overheated and warped, burning oil and losing compression before some cars even hit 30,000 miles. The body rusted so fast you could practically watch it happen, with holes appearing around wheel wells and doors while the car was still making payments. The interior rattled and squeaked and fell apart like it was held together with hope and duct tape. Owners who'd believed in Chevrolet, who'd chosen American over Japanese, felt betrayed in a way that went deeper than just losing money. The Vega sold over 2 million units, which meant 2 million disappointed customers telling their friends and families never to trust Chevrolet again. It nearly destroyed GM's credibility in the small car market for an entire generation and helped Japanese brands gain the foothold they still hold today. Number 7. The DeLorean DMC-12, the dream that became a nightmare. The DeLorean story reads like a Hollywood script because it basically became one. John DeLorean left a comfortable job at GM to build his dream car, a futuristic sports car with gull-wing doors, stainless steel body panels, and the promise of American innovation. The DMC-12 arrived in 1981 looking like nothing else on the road, like it had driven straight out of a science fiction movie. And then buyers actually got behind the wheel and realized that looks were about all it had going for it. The car was underpowered, unreliable, expensive, and handled like a shopping cart with 3 good wheels. Quality control was a joke. Doors didn't align, parts fell off, and the whole thing felt like it was assembled by people who'd never built a car before, which wasn't far from the truth. The company collapsed in 1983, taking with it the savings of investors, the jobs of workers in Northern Ireland, and John DeLorean's reputation. The DeLorean became famous later thanks to Back to the Future, but that almost makes it sadder. It took a movie about time travel to make people remember the car fondly. The DeLorean didn't just destroy its own brand, it destroyed the brand before the brand even had a chance to exist, proving that charisma and ambition aren't enough if you can't actually build a decent car.
Number 6. Jaguar X-Type, when British class met Ford's part spin. Jaguar spent decades building its reputation on elegance, performance, and that indefinable British sophistication that made their cars feel special even when they broke down. Then, Ford bought Jaguar in 1989, and by 2001, they decided to expand the brand by making it more accessible. The X-Type was born from that decision, a smaller, cheaper Jaguar based on a Ford Mondeo platform that was supposed to bring new customers into showrooms. It looked fine at first glance, with that distinctive Jaguar grille and elegant proportions that suggested British breeding and refinement. But enthusiasts knew, and soon, everyone knew. This was a Ford wearing a costume, a pretender to the throne, a car that betrayed everything Jaguar was supposed to represent. The X-Type drove fine, wasn't particularly unreliable by Jaguar standards, and served its purpose as basic transportation, but that was exactly the problem. Jaguar was never supposed to be basic, never supposed to be just fine. When customers started recognizing Ford's switchgear inside their premium British luxury car, when they realized they were paying extra for a badge on a platform they could get cheaper elsewhere, the spell broke. The X-Type sold poorly, cheapened the Jaguar name, and made the brand seem desperate rather than exclusive. Jaguar survived, but only after Ford sold them and new owners spent years trying to rebuild the mystique that one bad decision had nearly destroyed forever. Number 5. Pontiac Aztek, the SUV that killed a brand. The Pontiac Aztek rolled into showrooms in 2000 looking like it had been designed by a committee that couldn't agree on anything, so they just included everything. It was supposed to be adventurous, practical, and appeal to young buyers who wanted something different from boring family SUVs. Instead, it became one of the ugliest vehicles in automotive history, a rolling catastrophe of plastic cladding, mismatched proportions, and design elements that seemed to be fighting each other for control. The front end looked aggressive in a confused way, the rear was bland and awkward, and the whole thing sat on its wheels like it was surprised to be there. Car magazines mocked it, comedians used it as a punchline, and even Pontiac dealers reportedly struggled to look enthusiastic when showing it to customers. The really tragic part is that underneath the hideous exterior, the Aztek was actually pretty practical. It had clever storage, decent interior space, and could handle family duties just fine. But nobody cared, because nobody could get past what it looked like. The Aztek became shorthand for automotive failure, for what happens when companies lose touch with what people actually want. Pontiac never recovered from the damage. The Aztek poisoned the brand's image so thoroughly that when GM started cutting divisions during the financial crisis, Pontiac was an easy choice. An entire brand with decades of performance heritage and classics like the GTO died partly because one vehicle was so spectacularly wrong that it made people forget everything good that came before.
Number 4. Yugo GV, the car that made cheap feel expensive. In 1985, entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin started importing a tiny car from Yugoslavia called the Yugo, and he had a pitch that sounded almost too good to be true. A brand new car for less than $4,000. Americans who'd watched car prices climb through the 70s and 80s thought maybe, just maybe, this was the answer to affordable transportation. The Yugo GV hit dealerships promising basic, honest transportation for people who couldn't afford anything else. Then people started actually driving them, and the truth became painfully clear. You really do get what you pay for. The Yugo broke down constantly, in ways that seemed almost creative in their variety and frequency. Electrical systems failed, engines sputtered and died, parts fell off on the highway. The car felt like it was built from the finest recycled soup cans, held together with wishful thinking and prayers. Quality control was a concept the factory in Yugoslavia had apparently heard about, but never actually implemented. Dealers couldn't keep them running long enough to sell them. Owners couldn't keep them running long enough to pay them off, and mechanics just shook their heads in disbelief. The Yugo became a national joke, proof that some deals are too good to be true, and it nearly destroyed the entire concept of importing budget cars to America. The brand died in 1992, unmourned and unremembered except as a cautionary tale about the difference between inexpensive and worthless. Number 3. Chrysler TC by Maserati, the identity crisis on wheels. In the late 80s, Chrysler's chairman Lee Iacocca had a vision: combine American luxury with Italian exotic flair and create something truly special. The result was the Chrysler TC by Maserati, launched in 1989 after years of development problems and delays. It was supposed to be exclusive, sophisticated, a car that said you'd arrived without shouting about it. Instead, it looked almost identical to the Chrysler LeBaron convertible that cost half as much and sat in the same showrooms. The TC had some Maserati-designed touches, some Italian leather and unique bits, but not enough to justify the massive price difference. Buyers who wanted a real Maserati bought a real Maserati, and buyers who wanted a Chrysler convertible bought the cheaper LeBaron that looked basically the same. The TC existed in a no-man's land where nobody could figure out who it was for or why it existed. It sold terribly, only about 7,000 total over 3 painful years, and lost Chrysler money on every single unit. Worse than the financial loss was the reputational damage. The TC made Chrysler look confused about its identity, desperate for prestige it hadn't earned, and willing to slap fancy names on mediocre products. Maserati's reputation suffered too, their name now associated with a badge-engineered failure rather than Italian excellence. The TC almost destroyed the credibility both brands needed to survive in a competitive market that rewarded authenticity and punished pretenders.
Number 2. Edsel, the failure that became a verb. When Ford launched the Edsel in 1957, they weren't just introducing a new car, they were creating an entirely new brand with its own dealerships, identity, and place in the American automotive landscape. Ford spent years on research, invested the equivalent of hundreds of millions in today's dollars, and promised a car that would revolutionize the medium-priced market. The hype was enormous, the anticipation was unprecedented, and the fall was spectacular. The Edsel arrived with controversial styling that included a vertical grille some said looked like a toilet seat,
chrome that seemed excessive even by 50s standards, and proportions that just looked wrong to American eyes. But the styling wasn't even the worst problem. The cars were poorly built, unreliable, and arrived during a recession when Americans weren't buying medium-priced cars regardless of what they looked like. Dealers went bankrupt, owners felt betrayed, and the name Edsel became synonymous with failure so complete it entered the dictionary. Ford killed the brand after just 3 model years and tried to pretend it never happened, but the damage was done. The Edsel nearly destroyed Ford's reputation for knowing what customers wanted, nearly bankrupted the company's ability to invest in future products, and created a cautionary tale that business schools still teach about the dangers of hype over substance. The automotive world learned that even giants could fail, even legendary names could produce disasters, and even the most expensive research couldn't guarantee success. The automotive world learned that even giants could fail, even legendary names could produce disasters, and even the most expensive research couldn't guarantee success. Number 1. Chevrolet Corvair, the car that brought Ralph Nader. The Chevrolet Corvair seemed like such a good idea when it launched in 1960, an American car with a rear-mounted air-cooled engine like the Volkswagen Beetle, offering something different from the usual front-engine Detroit Iron. It was stylish, affordable, practical, and sold well for the first few years of production. Then, in 1965, a young lawyer named Ralph Nader published a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, and the first chapter was titled The Sporty Corvair, the One-Car Accident. Nader detailed how the Corvair's rear engine design created handling characteristics that could surprise and overwhelm average drivers, how the swing axle suspension could cause sudden oversteer, how people were getting hurt and killed in single-vehicle accidents. The book became a sensation, sparked congressional hearings, and turned the Corvair into a symbol of corporate negligence and the need for federal safety standards. GM tried to fight back, even hired private investigators to follow Nader, which only made things worse when that became public. The Corvair's sales collapsed, not killed by competition, but by the revelation that maybe, just maybe, GM had prioritized style and cost-cutting over the safety of the families who trusted them. Production ended in 1969, but the damage to GM's reputation lasted decades. The Corvair didn't just almost destroy Chevrolet, it nearly destroyed the entire automotive industry's relationship with the American public, forcing changes in how cars were designed, marketed, and regulated. It proved that even the biggest, most powerful corporation in America could be brought down by one dangerous product and one determined person with the truth. These 10 cars represent more than just mistakes. They represent moments when entire companies stood on the edge and looked into the abyss, when bad decisions threatened to undo generations of work and trust. Some of these brands survived by learning hard lessons, by rebuilding customer faith one car at a time, by remembering that reputation is built slowly but destroyed quickly. Others weren't so lucky, disappearing into history as cautionary tales about hubris, corner-cutting, and forgetting that people's lives depend on the quality of what you build. The automotive industry has given us legendary machines and memorable disasters, but these cars that almost destroyed their own brands remind us that even legends can fall, and that the distance between success and catastrophe is sometimes just one bad model year away. If this trip through automotive near disasters got your engine running, hit that like button and tell us in the comments, are there any other cars you think nearly killed their brands? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another journey through the stories, the successes, and the spectacular failures that made American automotive history what it is today. Until next time, here's to learning from the past so we don't repeat its worst mistakes.